Hello everybody, Math 11 Quarter 1 Week 3 lesson plan students. Let's go right into Math 11 Quarter 1 Week 3 PowerPoint editions of lessons, and you get a video edition too. Hey. Week 3 lesson plans Algebra 2 is actually what this is. Students, name date here on your lesson plan acceptance sheet. And let's go right into our week 3 Math 11 Quarter 1 and your lessons for week 3. And you got quizzes. You got 2 quizzes here for week 3. We go into 1.7 complete the square, classwork homework part 1, 2, and 3. And then we go 1.8 quadratic formula and the discriminant, classwork homework part 1, 2, and 3. And then 1.9 graph and solve quadratic inequalities, classwork homework part 1, 2, 3, and 4 for 1.9. And what's our standard here? Here's our standard. I can't read that. Here it is. Here it's Common Core 9 through 12.A.REI.4a. Use the method of completing the square to transform any quadratic equation in X into an equation of the form quantity x minus p squared equals q that has the same solutions. Derive the quadratic formula from this form. So we go into that in week 3, and here is your standard for that. And what else we got here? We got our intro here is factor quadratic expressions of the form ax squared plus bx plus c. Identify the zeros of the function from its factored form, and then interpret interpret the meaning of zeros in mathematical expressions. Basically what is it? It's the theorem of algebra, actually. Started getting into that. And then learning targets, add, subtract, and multiply complex numbers. Use the identity of I squared equals -1 to simplify expressions. And then apply the commutative, associative, and distributive properties to complex number operations. Resources, materials, animated PowerPoints, and/or MP4 versions of all lessons, classwork, homework, quiz, test, worksheets, activities, and tasks. All classwork sheets are closed exercise from PowerPoints or MP4s. Homework, quizzes, and test assignments available online with corrections provided after submission dates. And then access for all, available in over 100 languages, available online 24/7. Closed caption for hearing impaired, audio for sight impaired. And then your classwork is 239 points of classwork, 74 points of note taking, 633 points of homework, 150 points of quizzes, and then your total for week 3 is 1,096 points for week 3. So, solve quadratic equations, and we have more here for learning targets. Solve quadratic equations using multiple methods, factoring square roots, completing the square, and the quadratic formula. Recognize when solutions are complex and express them in the form of a over p m to the bi, and then justify the choice of method based on the structure of the equation. So we get into that as well. So let us go into modifications and accommodations, week 3 here, Math 11 Quarter 1, and those are, we don't get into that yet. We're going to go in. We're going to go into one of the standards we're covering, A.REI.4a. Use the method of completing the square to transform any quadratic equation in X into the equation of the form quantity x minus p squared equals q that has the same solutions. Derive the quadratic formula from this form. So we're going to follow that standard. And oh yeah, available online via Google Classroom interface. That is grades, classwork, homework, quizzes, tests, Zoom tutoring on request. And we start out here with 1.7 complete to square, 26 points classwork, and then 1.7 homework, 63 points part 1, 13 points in note taking. So we get right off the bat here completing the square. And then we go into our classwork part 2, 22 points for classwork part 2, 16 points of note taking. And then we go into 1.7 part 2 homework of 56 points. And moving on, 1.7 part 3 classwork. 22 points of classwork here, part 3. 6 points of note taking. And then 1.7 part 3 homework, 84 points of homework, 1.7 part 3 for your homework. And then moving on here into week 3, our lesson plans, 1.7 complete to square, and you get your quiz here for 1.7 complete to square, and that's worth 62 points for the quiz for 1.7. And then we move on to 1.8 part 1 classwork, 29 points, use a quadratic formula and the discriminant. And then we go into our homework, 65 points, 1.8 part 1. And oh, this is our standard here is point M, point C, and point 7. Solve quadratic equations with real coefficients that have complex solutions. So that's a standard covering this. And then we go 1.8 part 2 classwork, 22 points, to use quadratic formula and a discriminant, 4 points of note taking, 1.8 homework, 56 points of homework for 1.8 part 2, and then 1.8 part 3 classwork, 22 points, 13 points of note taking, and we have CN 0.7, same as standard is up there for this down here. And then to finish off, finally, week 3, 1.8 part 3 homework, 96 points of homework for 1.8 part 3, and then 13 points of note taking. And then 1.9, going to 1.9 part 1, 26 points here of classwork, 5 points of note taking for 1.9 part 1. And then 1.9 part 1 homework, 80 points of homework for 1.9 graph and solve quadratic inequalities. And here is our standard covering 1.9, mostly point A, point REI, point 4B, solve quadratic equations by inspection. For example, x squared equals 49, taking the square roots, completing the square, the quadratic formula, and factoring as appropriate to the initial form of the equation. Recognize when the quadratic formula gives complex solutions and write them as a plus bi for real numbers a and b. So we got that covered, and we continue in 1.9 part 2 classwork, 22 points, 4 points note taking, 1.9 part 2 homework, 60 points of homework, and 1.9 part 3, oh yeah, part 3 here, we got 24 points for part 3 classwork, graph and solve quadratic inequality, 11 points of note taking, and we're not done yet. This is week 3, 1.9 graph and solve, part 3 here. Quadratic inequalities, homework is 76 points. And we're not done yet. Part 4, 1.9, graph and solve Quadratic Inequalities, Part 4. Our classwork is 24.6 points of note-taking. Then our homework is 67 points of homework for 1.9, Part 4, Graph and Solve, Quadratic Inequalities. And then we have our quiz. We have a 1.9 quiz, which is 80 points for a quiz. That's very large. 1.9 Graph and Solve, Quadratic Inequalities. And what else? We got learning targets, I guess. More learning targets. Again, we have solve quadratic equations by inspection, taking square roots, completing the square quadratic formula, and factoring as appropriate to the initial form of the equation. Recognize when a quadratic formula gives complex solutions and write them as a plus bi for real numbers a and b. And animated PowerPoint math video at AOL.com for questions, course materials. Thank you very much.